Hello beautiful people, how are you? Thank you very much for joining me today. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some camera gear, some Sigma lenses, Nikon products and announcements, and some new releases. And we've got actually a lot to talk about, so it's all very exciting. So let's start off with the most relevant subject of the day, and that's going to be what is rumoured announcement of the Nikon Z8. Now we believe it's a Z8 because when you look at the promotional ad, which is really just a page, it does illustrate things like has a little video symbol, which I'll illustrate for you up in the corner of the screen. So it has a little video symbol which shows that it's got something to do with video or playing of some sort of media. Then if you have a look down in the very lowest right hand corner of the screen, you'll see a lot of question marks. They talk about question mark, and as they diminish right at the end, the last thing it is an 8, or at least it appears to be an 8 above the final question mark, quite faded. So it's like a subtle hint. So we are looking at, I believe, a video capable camera. Basically it's the Z9 mini version. So it's going to have almost all of the same features as the Z9, labelled as the Z8. It won't have the battery grip, so it'll be a bit more compact. The impression that I'm under, and the rumours that I've heard, is actually it's going to be very much like the D850 was. That was a digital camera, of course, but it was the old school F-mount, and we're going to have basically a replacement for that in the form of the Z-mount cameras from Nikon. So the Z8 will pretty much be the 850. I think it's got an 8 in it, so that sort of makes very much sense. So it's going to have the similar sensor in that it'll have around 45 megapixels as the D850 did, and that's exactly the same sensor and arrangement as the Z9 has. So really there's very little change from the Z9, other than you're missing the battery grip, which of course is a big deal for many, because it makes the camera a bit more handleable, a bit lighter, and a bit more easier to pack away. So some people that's very important. For me, for example, to have that option of being able to compact down the camera is really essential. So just to illustrate, for example, I have the Z7 here and I have the battery grip on. Now, what's the difference with this and the Z9 is that I can remove this battery grip in a moment's notice. So it only takes a few seconds and you get to reduce the size of the camera. So let me just illustrate that for you, because it only takes a few seconds. Scroll wheel and off it comes. And now my Z7 is very small and compact, and I can easily put it into a camera bag. And if I wanted to still take this with me, I can put it in the camera bag too, but it just keeps everything a bit smaller and lower profile. Once they're attached, it is actually quite a heavy and bulky item. Now, brilliant for portrait photography, and particularly for using a big heavy lens. So I'm illustrating right now, I've got the 70-200 2.8S lens from Nikon. It's a Z-mount lens, but it's still quite weighty at about 1.5 kilograms. So there's a bit of weight there. So what I find is that when you actually put the battery grip on and you attach it, and screw it in, and this is only a thumb screw, it takes only a few seconds, and you've got it all together. It is quite a big, heavy, bulky item in the hands. So that's great for some. Some love that. I love it. The reason I own this grip is specifically for doing my portrait photography. It is absolutely amazing to have that grip and all the buttons readily available, and to have that comfortable holding arrangement. So I'm really impressed with the grip and comfort of the grip when I want it. The question is, though, there are going to be times when you don't want it and it's just too big and heavy and unnecessary for you. So the extra battery life and the comfort of the grip is fantastic, and that's why a lot of people have bought the Z9, because that's the sort of professional camera that they want. They're doing things that are going to require a lot of battery power through the day, whether it be extensive video, or perhaps they're shooting a big event and they're doing thousands of photos, like a wedding or some sort of a sports occasion, Olympics, and they need to just keep going all day. So for them, it's magnificent. But for many of us who want a sort of a more versatile camera that doesn't weigh a great deal and be bulky all the time, it's wonderful to be able to have something that compacts down. So being the Z8 version, it'll have all the bells and whistles really that the Z9 has, only a more compact version of it. There are a few compromises, of course, coming. Things like the memory card slot. Now in this one here, when I show you the card slot, you'll see here that we have two. We have the CF Express, and then we have an SD card. Now that's fantastic because they have got some versatility and you've got some backup, and that's pretty much what the Z8 will have. It'll have the same sort of a setup where you have one sort of card as your primary card. And let's say, for argument's sake, you get your CF Express card, and then you have a backup version option available of an SD. So whatever media you happen to already possess, you're going to be able to be up and running without buying anything special, and that's a great choice. So if you're upgrading from, say, a Z6 or a Z7 and you're going to the Z8, Well, if you've had the Z6, Z7 Mark II, you've already got that media. Just slot it straight in the new camera and up and ready to go. So that's good and it's comfortable and it's what you're familiar with. For those who want the 2CF Express cards, well, that's why they have a Z9. So just use that by all means. So right now, I just thought I'd run you through. I'm shooting on the Nikon Z6 Mark II, and that's a great video camera, and I'm using it for video, of course, right now. It does terrific photos too, but just its video quality is quite exceptional. Not hurting that at all is, of course, the lens I'm using right now. So the lens I'm using is the 50mm f1.2, and I'm shooting it at f1.2. So it should be a nice shallow depth of field. So you'll notice when I bring things up and show you, I tend to bring them up here because it's such a shallow depth of field. If I don't, you won't see anything. It'll be a blurry mess. So hopefully that's an interesting look. But I just thought I'd show you that look on the Z6 II with the 50mm. I'm actually using a polarizing filter on as well. I'm trying to reduce the light. I've changed my lighting just recently, and I'll just sneak that in there in the middle of the conversation because we're talking about lenses and lighting right now. Just reduce my lighting down to a very large ring light with a central LED light panel. I'll show you a photo in the corner of the picture, what it looks like. And I've reduced it from a very large light panel. So just let me show you the very large light panel. It's a powered unit. There's the big cable. And if I just bring it up here, oh, sorry, it's very heavy. It is a big unit, it's very heavy. It folds out, it's a professional studio LED light. That's a diffusion panel I can attach if I wish. But as you can see, this is the light I've been using previously to light my videos. And yeah, when I'm shooting at f2.8 or f4, that's perfectly fine and very functional. It's a 180 watt light. It's extremely powerful video light. We'll just place it down there. The downside, however, of that light, as magnificent as it is and powerful and big, is that it's also extremely heavy. It weighs about 7 kilos. So it's all solid aluminium. You know, it's not a kid's toy, that's a professional unit. And when I was having that, I wanted to move the light around the room. It was quite an effort. I had to pay a lot more attention to the strength of the light stand and the fittings associated with it to make sure I could hold it up. And you're having this tinier, much lighter weight system. I've gone from a 7 kilogram light now to about a 1 kilo light setup, and it's continuously powered, and it just makes things so much easier to move around the room and get angular lighting where I want it. Now, when I'm using something like a Z6 with this wonderful ISO capability, should I need it, right now it's on 100, the ISO, native ISO, so I don't need to crank the ISO up. Because I'm using that 51.2 at 1.2, it's so bright that actually it's reducing the light is the problem. So I've got that light down very low. It's on about, and I think an average of 25%, and that's a vastly smaller light than the other one. So you just don't need a lot of lighting when you've got a quality lens and camera. So that's what I was shooting on right now. I've got the Nikon system, as you know, and I have the Nikon lenses. As I say, I'm using the Nikon S50 1.2 right now, and here you can see the 70-200 S-line lens, and I'm very happy with the Nikon lenses and products. Now, I'm introducing that theme because a little later on I'm going to be talking about some other lenses from Sigma, etc., and I just wanted to show you that it's not like I'm disloyal. I'm very practical, and if I see a good value item, I'm going to grab it and use it. So we were talking about the Z8 just previously. Sorry, I got a little bit off track there. But basically, other than the different card slots, that is the compromised down to an SD card instead of 2 CF Expresses, and no battery grip option immediately with the camera, the only other really difference is its weight. And so I think we'll have a really good time using that unit. Those who wish to buy one will have a great value from that. It'll be a little bit cheaper, a little bit lighter and compact, and basically everybody who's always loved the D850 is going to fit right into that very comfortably. So I think that's a great idea from Nikon to bring that out. It certainly gives people options and choices, and I'm sure in time that if it doesn't already fit compatibly with existing battery grips, I'm sure they'll bring out a specific battery grip for it, should you want that as an option and a choice. So I'm very excited about the Z8. Will I be getting one? Probably not in a hurry. I'm actually really happy with the cameras I got. They do everything I need, and I don't need to spend another $6,000 or $7,000 Australian just to get the latest gimmick out. So as good as it may be, things that are good are also got to be practical, and you've also got to have an application and a use for them. And quite frankly, right now, immediately, I don't have any use for that camera. So I think maybe in a year or 3, when I feel like I need to upgrade, I might consider it. But right now, I'm very happy with the Z6 and Z7 Mark II. So anyway, I'm loving the lenses, and I'm loving these 2 cameras I got, and I've got a whole lot of pictures and photos to show you. See, really, other than the Nikon News, which we'll be talking about, I'll be illustrating some lenses I purchased recently. I spoke about them in a previous video only a month ago, and that was this range of 3 Sigma lenses I have here, and I'll run through them shortly. But right, we're still talking about news, aren't we? And one of the other latest news that are coming out that's very exciting and a definite thing is some Sigma lenses. So for our crop sensor use cameras, that is, you got your Z50, you've got your ZFC, etc., and your little Z30. They've always needed some more lenses in the lineup that are specifically for the DX size. And just recently they've had a collaboration with Sigma, and they've brought out a few great little primes. So they've got here, I believe, look, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the exact numbers, I'll get back to you on that, but it's something to the effect of like a 24, a 33 or 35 and a 50. And thereabouts are the numbers that they'll equivalate in a full frame lens. And that'll be very handy for all of those using the DX cameras and have specific primes for them. And also the beauty is that they're not expensive. See, they're what they call a conventional lens, which means they're not the art style lens, but they're still a very high quality prime lens, and they'll give a beautiful bokeh, a nice clean image, and they'll be specifically a Z mount lens. So you're not worrying about any adapters if that should concern you. So they'll just snap straight on your cameras and work perfectly. And you see what's happened here is Sigma have worked with Nikon to get these lenses exactly right for you. So for those who want these DX lenses, they're going to work really well and be quite magnificent to use. Now, I've used a lot of Sigma lenses in the past. I know they're very good. I've got 3 here that I like. They're older model art lenses, but they still work fantastic on the Z system. So it's great that they've got those options, but I wanted to also mention why they brought these out. And it's clear what they brought these out for. It's not that Nikon had no other options. I mean, we've got Viltrox, for example. Viltrox have a kit of 3 lenses. They've got, I think it is equivalent a 23, a 33 and a 56 or something like that in crop sensor lenses. And they're very affordable and very high quality. Now, I've owned the I think it was a 13mm f1.4 or something like that. It was a great lens for wide angle. Since then I've got other options and I don't use that anymore. I don't have a crop sensor camera with me at the moment. But anyway, the point is, however, that I understand why Nikon wanted to bring out their own independent units. So rather than bring them out themselves under the Nikon brand as Nikon lenses, really what they are is they're Sigma lenses that are collaborated with Nikon. So Nikon get a bit of a cut and a share. They've got some control of which lenses they're bringing out and how their quality is, where with Viltrox they have no input and no control. So you never know how that's going to work out in the future. Like Canon has banned various lens manufacturers for making lenses for their mounts. Maybe Nikon could do the same, we don't know. So it's a great investment that when you buy a lens, you buy one that's actually specifically endorsed and collaborated with Nikon, so that you know not that they just work, but they're going to be working 5-10 years from now, and they're going to be updatable. So that's an interesting thing, and I just thought I'd bring that out. That I give the lenses 100% recommendation because I know the Sigma make a good lens, and I know they work very well with the Nikon Z system. So I wanted to give that a thumbs up. I was very happy to see those released for those interested in the crop sensor cameras. For me right now, I have all full frame cameras and I'm loving using them, and I've got a lot of full frame lenses for them. So talking about these various lenses, there is one other lens that's come out for DX system with Nikon, and that's being released as a 12 to, I think it is 28, 12 to 28 mil, I believe it is, f2.8, and it's called the Power Zoom. So this is not an S-line lens, it's not the highest quality. In fact, it's very much like some of the other cheaper lightweight primes they've brought out that has the plastic mount because it's a lightweight lens. So they just don't feel it needs the metal mount and the extra money that would cost. So trying to keep costs down and make it affordable for our DX users, and let's face it, 90% of DX users are interested in saving money. That's what they're trying to achieve. So, if they can cut some corners and make sure that the lens still is optically beautiful, but just maybe doesn't have a metal mount or some other S-line feature, but it works beautifully well, then that's great. So the idea of this power zoom thing is more like a video-centric lens, being very wide aperture. That's equivalent to if you're on a full frame camera using something like an 18 to 40. So, that's a great range to have in your camera, nice wide angle. It means you can do your selfies and vlogging, of course, and you can do your architecture and landscape photography and have it as wide as you really need. I mean, let's face it, you rarely use more than 18 mils wide anyway, don't you? If you look at 100% of your photos, you'll find 99% of them are shot over 18 mils. So that's really no compromise. That's a great system and a great option to have in your lens lineup. So I'd highly recommend that one too for your DX users. So anyway, the other thing we're going to talk about today, other than new releases and speculations on how good things will be, we'll have to wait a long time, of course, until they all come out and get in the hands, and then we can review them hands-on. But at the moment, I see no reason that they won't be good, because everything else they've released has been excellent, so why wouldn't these? You'd have to assume the best of them, wouldn't you? So I'll just put this camera aside for a few seconds, just to give me some space here, and I'll bring out these other lenses that I've had recently, and we can talk about them. So the next subject we're going to move on to tonight is we're going to be talking about these various lenses I have here, and I'll just go through them with you, and we'll look at one at a time, and I can illustrate to you exactly how they work and how pleased I have been with their performance. So what we have here, if we just start off the day, just bring them in a little closer because I forgot about the depth of field that I'm working with here. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is actually the larger of them, and that is this one here, which is the 85 f1.4. Now I very much like this lens. I've been using it for the last couple of days. I used it at a convention for cosplay and anime characters, you know, superheroes and the likes, and I'll show you some photos to illustrate. And this lens was used 90% of the time. I used the 50 1.2 Z lens a few times when I was doing large group photos, because I just needed a slightly wider angle to make it practical. But for every individual portrait shot I took, it was this 85, and I was trying it out for the day with the Z7 II, just to see how it all came together and how it worked. Now I might add, it actually was magnificent. It's quite a little bit of a weightier lens, so if I can just illustrate here with the camera, and I'll just remove this lens here and make it safe. So I was using this camera here, the Z7 II, and I had it with the battery grip on. And so what I was using it, the way I was using it, was I was using the FTZ adapter, of course, which is what you have to do to mount it. And the FTZ adapter I was using, I have two. So that's a bit indulgent of me, isn't it? But I'll just take one off the 35mm, I think it is there. As you can see, I have the Mark I version, and here I have the Mark II version. And as you can see, the only real difference between the two is one has that mount and lump, and the other one does not. But they both work exactly the same and are just every bit as functional as each other. There's no difference. When I swap them around from one to another, I notice no difference in its performance. The only difference I find really is with this one that is more spherical and smoother in operation, that once you've got that on and put together, that I notice that it doesn't get in the way with the battery grip, and sometimes that's important. So if you've got a camera as I have and I'm using the battery grip at the moment, it's quite nice to be able to have something without a lump in the way that just restricts your finger movement and control. So I'm just going to put this together. There we go. And that's basically exactly the unit I was using for the whole weekend. So when I say the whole weekend, I'm talking about from 8:30 in the morning till about 5 o'clock in the evening. And that was 2 days in a row, Saturday and all day Sunday. I was completely booked out, and I was doing a great deal of shoots, and I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. A lot of these people are my long-term friends. I've known them for, well, anything from 5 to 10 years. I regularly take their photos, so we know each other well, and we had a lot of fun working together. So I was trying out this new system here, where I got the Sigma 85 1.4, and I was using the FTZ adapter Mark II. And together with the Z system camera, it was working beautifully. I can't tell you highly enough how happy I was. Out of the, well, at least 1,000 photos that I'd taken, I can tell you now that 998 were sharp. The only two that weren't was user error on my part. I didn't focus properly, or I focused on the wrong part of the face, but it was never in any way attributed to either the lens or the adapter. They all worked beautifully well. So sometimes you get a bit of user error. That's just natural when you're busy and you're stressed. And I was actually going from photos to video, videos to photo, because I took my Ronin RS3 with me, and I had the Z6 on it with a wide angle lens at 24 Sigma, and I was doing running video, making a little video which I'll illustrate for you, and then I was also then using the Z7 exclusively for the photos. So with the battery grip on it, made great use of the practicality of being able to turn it around and use all the buttons and grips that you do to make it comfortable use when you're doing portraits. And I was doing portraits most of the day, so a lot of the time it was in the portrait angle, so that was very comfortable and practical. But of course you can switch it around either way. You have buttons everywhere you need them, so it's just extremely practical to have the battery grip on when you're actually doing a lot of portraits. Now, how did the 85 1.5 work? Well, it worked perfectly. So I had no issue with it at all. It always, got onto the eye. I focus manually. I don't use eye detect just because I prefer to choose exactly which eye and when. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the camera, and when I've got it on, I'm going to scroll around with a little red wheel there until I get exactly where I want it, and then I'm going to take the photo. So that's done I choose the focus point. But it chose it well. It always was in focus and very, very sharp. So the lens quality was super sharp. Yeah, as you'll see from these images, you won't be disappointed. Look, I had almost no illustration or sort of situation with ghosting, flaring, chromatic aberration, all these things you hear horror movies about with the off-camera brand lenses. I had no issues with those at all. And anyway, there's nothing you can't fix in post. I mean, these days, Lightroom and Photoshop, just a click of a button and a little adjustment of a slider and all those problems go away. So who cares? You know, it's irrelevant. So I think that was a big deal back in the day. If we sort of think about lenses and cameras back in the time of film, and they were very manual cameras, yes, you had to really make sure everything was perfect in camera and make a lot of fuss and time. But with these digital cameras and all the magnificent editing software that we have today with either Photoshop, Lightroom or Capture One or whatever it is you happen to be using, you've got every choice to correct anything you want and make adjustments. So the lens was magnificent, and I was very impressed with it all day. And I want you to consider this. This is a really important detail, okay? This lens here, it cost me like $700 secondhand on eBay. Just take that in for a minute. It's 85 1.4, super sharp, works beautiful with the system, and it was $700. The 85 1.2 from Nikon, as magnificent as that lens is, and I'm sure it is fantastic, is $4,500. So for 5 times as much, was it worth ever getting the 85 1.2? Well, for me, it's not. For the difference between 1.4 and 1.2, that tiny incremental difference in brightness and shallowness, it just wasn't worth an extra $4,000. If I could only just illustrate the difference that makes, it's unbelievable. So just to illustrate what I got here you see the 85 1.4, yeah, and here I have the 24, and here I have the 34. So I think 24, 35, 85. If I also bought the 51.4 from Sigma, and plus the 135mm 1.8 art lens from Sigma. So I had 5 lenses secondhand that I bought on eBay for Sigma, and these are all in A1 absolutely mint condition. I can't recognize them from brand new. They're exactly like brand new lenses because they were well cared for and in great condition and packaged well. So I feel that I've really bought new lenses. I've just got them for a fraction of the price. By shopping around, I can get 5 of these high quality art lenses for less money than the 85 1.2 from Nikon for Z-mount. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I have 5 other lenses instead of that one new expensive one that was only incrementally different from this 85 1.4 anyway? So that's the choices I made, and I'm very happy I've made them. And I think these lenses are just amazing value for money. So are there better lenses out there on the market? You can buy Zeiss, you can buy some Nikon Z9 lenses, and they're probably better quality in every way. But it's such a slight variation of differences optically that I can't see it's of any value to anyone really. So in talking about value for anyone and how practical these things are, this is what I'm going to say. I've used the 24, I've used the 35 on video, and let me tell you, they work magnificently, and I couldn't tell any difference between their performance than the S-line lenses. So I've had the 20mm S-line lens, 20mm 1.8Z, I've had the 24, I've had the 35mm Z-mount lenses, and their performance functionally on the camera is no difference to the Sigma lenses and the FTZ adapter. I couldn't tell any difference apart from them. So the only difference I noticed is these are actually a shallower depth of field because they're 1.4 instead of 1.8, and that I noticed. I could really tell the brightness. I could really tell the shallow depth of field I was getting from video, particularly with these wider aperture lenses. And but the actual performance on the camera was, to me, almost identical. So if there was any difference, it was so minor, it was incremental, and I couldn't pick it up myself anyway. It certainly got focus every time, held the image beautifully, and they looked great. So look, I'm not preaching for Sigma, but I'm just preaching about value and bargains and spending your money wisely. And I think I've spent my money wisely buying these lenses, and I can only recommend others to do the same if you're wishing to save some money. So that's no poo-poo on the Z-mount lenses. They are brilliant lenses. I don't buy them. I don't own them. I'm filming with one now, and I've got the 70-200 there. I don't buy them because I hate them. I just know that if there's a cheaper value for money unit out there that I can save a couple of $1,000s on, well, I'm interested and my ears are pricking up and I'm going to go have a look at it. So I can highly recommend you trying them out anyway on this system. Okay, so Just like to finish up in saying this, that I'll give you a little demonstration in video, so you'll see that come up on the screen soon. And it's about me editing a photo set from a young gentleman, Jake Robinson. Now, he's a lovely man. He plays in a band, has a guitar, and he wanted me to take some portrait photos. So I chose just 2 of that set of about 100 photos just to illustrate, because they were perfectly set to illustrate editing software and the advantages that we have in modern era now, especially with Lightroom and Photoshop, in correcting any minor differences in your cameras. So when we talk about, oh yeah, but that was a f1.4 and I should have used a 1.2, or it was a 2.8 instead of a 1.8, or whatever it happens to be, and you're thinking maybe you've compromised and missed out too much. Well, I'll illustrate here through some basically editing to show you how you can actually correct that in post-processing anyway, and therefore correct it and shallow out that background and brighten up the image and do what you like in editing software, and don't feel that you're missing out just because you didn't have the latest high-tech expensive gear. You can actually do it with a few sliders and a few clicks of a button. So you watch out for that one. You'll find it's only a brief 5-minute video, but you might get your eyes opened on just how impressive the editing software is today. So thanks guys for joining me on this little video. Sorry about some background noise, we've got the computer humming, the fan going, so it's comfortable, so excuse that. But right now what we've got here is a picture of Jake Robinson, a lovely young man, plays in a band, obviously likes his guitar and rock music, and he's a great young gentleman. So he was modelling me for a while there. We're doing some photos for his personal use, having some portraits available for his band and his own ID. And so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to illustrate the idea of working with pre-existing photos and modifying the background. Because sometimes you get a great photo of the individual, but you just want to soften up that background a little bit more because maybe you did not have a very highly expensive, f1.2 or 1.4 lens, and you thought, look, all I had was a f4 or a 2.8 or something like that, and you used it and it did a good job of the photo, but gee, wouldn't it be nice to soften it and isolate him a bit more? So this is where we can isolate the subject a bit more simply with post-processing without buying those maybe potentially very expensive lenses. You still can work with what you have. So regardless of what you've shot with, in this illustration, I'm using a 105mm f1.4 lens, but I've actually shot it at the 105mm but at the f3.2. Now, why did I choose f3.2? Well, the reason is that I wanted the whole subject in focus, from the tip of his guitar to the back of his head, because it was all about him and I want to make sure he was crisp and sharp. The background wasn't that big a deal because it was a long way away from him, so there's quite a bit of distance that blurs it out regardless. But at f3.2 it's not unreasonable and it's quite a decent photo. But can we make it softer? Can we make that look like, for example, I shot it at say f1.8? Well, actually, yes, you can, and I'll just illustrate how we can do this very simply in this Adobe Lightroom software. Now, we could have used anything from Photoshop, Capture One, whatever, DaVinci. It doesn't really matter which program you use. They all pretty much have these features now, but I'll illustrate it for you just with, if you follow my little cursor here, you'll see everything I'm doing and what I'm illustrating on. So right here, it's f3.2. That is the aperture that I shot it at. You can see I used the 105 lens. It's the 105 Nikon 1.4. I've chosen 3.2, but can we make it softer? Well, let's have a look. So if I go down to this tool here, it's called the masking tool. Notice it's a circle, like the little dancing ants you get around a masking tool. If I click on that tool and just let it run its little program, you'll see some options I've got here. Now, initially it's detecting if there's any people in the image, and it's found one. So you notice here, if I hover over that or choose here subject, I get the same result. It'll isolate only Jake, which is fantastic. So I could edit him if I wish to. I don't actually need to. The photo is fine. I'm very happy with the image. It's bright enough. I used some forward lighting to make sure he wasn't overly shadowed. And you can see some backlighting here where I've got some golden glow behind, some red on this side of him from some speed lights either side. And that's helped to give him a bit of colour and make him a bit coordinated with the colours of his guitar and clothing. So I matched it nicely. But anyway, I would like to blur out the background. So I'm going to choose background. Notice this, automatically select the background in the photo. It's powered by AI. So let's give that a click and see how we go with that and see what it does. See, it's detecting the background now. So I'll let it do its masking, and there you have it. Only the background has been now selected. It's left Jake all alone. So if I go to these options here now and I say, all right, let's have a look at our little scrolls, I'll look at exposure. If I want to brighten exposure, I can go really bright. If I want to darken it down, I can make it really dark. but that's not what I'm after today. What I'm after today is I'm after the background detail. So if we go down a bit, I'm just scrolling down, we get down to the presence of the image and its details. That's what I'm interested in. So here we have texture. So for texture, clarity, dehaze, and sharpness. They're the ones I'm going to be looking at right now. So if I go on to the texture and I bring that down, you see how we can soften that background quite a lot? You go the other way, you make it more intense and sharper. Well, we don't want sharper, do we? So from 0, we're going to go 50% just as a ballpark starting point, okay? I actually recommend people start at around 20% and work their way up, but I already know that 50% is about where I want to be. So if we go down to the next one, clarity, notice if I go up with clarity, it makes it more contrasty in the background. That's not what I want. I want to go softer than 0. So we go a bit softer, down to about 50% again. It's dramatically softer. If I go down now to sharpness, oh yeah, I can bring it up to sharpness and make it a bit more contrasty. But if I go down 50% on the sharpness, it's only going to help with making the background a bit softer. Now that's great, that's all I need to do in this area here. If I use something like dehaze, well, that's just going to increase more contrast again, or make the thing so bright it looks like a washout. So I'm not going to touch dehaze, it's not my friend today, it's not going to help me. So for the background softening, I've done everything I need to do there. So I've scrolled up again to my general editing where, and then what I'm going to do in the background is just increase the color saturation. Now the reason I'm doing that is it matches it with the rest of the image now and brings it back to being more real and a natural looking color. Because you're washing it out as you're decreasing the saturation, the sharpness, etc., you need to sort of increase that back later on. So I've just increased the color but not the sharpness. Now I'm finished with that editing. I'm very happy with that. I think in contrast to what we started with, instead of having 3.2, it's looking more like now about 1.8. Now how can I prove that that's the case? Well, I have a second image that was shot at f2. When you compare the two together, you'll see that this did look now like f2. So if I click on the second image, you can see how it's almost identical. And as you can see up here, this was actually shot on the 105 at f2. I was experimenting to see how much of him I could get sharp and how much I was losing out. At f2, I'm just starting to get the shoulders a bit soft, so some parts of him are starting to get out of focus, but it's still a decent image. So I was happy to keep it as one of the options. In the background here, it's quite a soft background. I'm actually pretty impressed with that. But what we're going to do is just illustrate, well, can we make this f2.0 and make that look, say, f1.4? Well, let's have a look and see how we go with the same procedure. So if I go over here, we've gone into the masking arrangement. We're still in that, so I've not left it. And I go to background. We click on background. And we see here it's detecting the background only, and it should make a red haze of the background. There it goes, it's popped that in for us. And what we're going to do now is we'll go down, we're just going to scroll a little bit down, and we get down to these textures, clarity, and sharpness that I'm interested in. So let's scroll this one down. We're going to go down 50% as we did last time, and you can immediately see a result. You can see here how we've softened the image and it's made it a bit more pale. So we go to clarity now, we do the same with clarity, and wow, it's a lot softer, isn't it, the background? If we go into the sharpness and do the same, this is all helping, and we're getting a much softer image. I only need around 50% maximum. I think if you go too far with it, it starts to look really artificial. Now here's an important factor that I need to bring out. He is sitting on stones here, so this is really a part of his focal plane. If I left that as it is, it looks soft now, it looks artificially soft. If we go into this area here, this Create New Mask tool, you'll see an option of subtract or add. I would like to subtract what I've done a little bit. So I can click that and go down to my options and click brush. That gives me now a specific tool to restore the sharpness. So I'm going to restore the sharpness only to that stone area. Now remember, it doesn't matter if I go over his legs or guitar, it will make no difference because this is just editing the background parts only. And that's all I want is those stones now to be as sharp as he is so that they're in the same focal plane and that all looks part of the photo. So I've finished with that, I'm happy. I can go back to the original other image I started on. We can do the same with that if I want to. So let's have a look at the subtract tool again. We go to brush. And now if I just hit over those stones and we can make sure that they look nice and sharp and it looks all natural again now. So everything that should be in focus and should be sharp is, and everything we wanted to edit out soft now is soft. And we've actually upgraded our lens about $2,000 by a click of a button and a few sliders. So I wanted to point that out. I'm using Lightroom, of course. You could be using Photoshop, you could be using Adobe DaVinci, it doesn't really matter what you're using. It'll all do the same sort of a thing. But it's worth it if you need to upgrade the look of your image without having to upgrade it to an expensive lens. This is an option at least that you have. Is it perfect? I'm not going to say it's perfect, but wow, it's really good and very convincing. So thank you for watching that. I'd file these images away and I'll compare the two together for you in just a moment. So in conclusion, I just wanted to thank you for watching through that and listening to me ramble on about my opinion. I hope I can always be useful.